Okay. So yeah, so my question was, how many fish are we talking about in our little, we were talking about little tiny fish, and we have little tiny Siman. I don't think these are little tiny salmons though. These are little fish. Somebody said 61. Any other numbers?
Anything more than 60.
More than 60. Any other numbers? Many. Jessica says many. Yes. Okay, well, we'll have to think about exactly how many there are, because that's actually important how many there are. Well, if you recall, what we talk about is that some fish, I'll just paint that. First of all, this is a big machloket about what the case is, what the case of our Siman is. One, the Beit Yosef basically says that the case is that you're pouring, like you have a pot of fish, let's say 150 fish, tiny little fish, and you're pouring them out piece by, group by group, maybe 30 fish at a time into a bowl. Maybe because it's a big pot, you can't pour it all at once, so you pour it in Hebrew we say naglot, in portions. You pour out a portion, you pour out another portion, you pour another portion. Eventually, it all ends up in the same serving tray. Can somebody tell me what is the worry? What's the concern if you did that? And then eventually it's all, no. So the case is you pour it all out into the serving tray in that staged process. And then you see in your serving tray one little fish that clearly does not have snapir and kesset. It has, maybe it's a shark, a little tiny shark, a baby shark is in there with your papa shark. No, with your other fish. And so now you say, oh, well, I got 150 against one shark. It's batel. So what does can somebody tell me outside, what does the Sefer Mitzvah say about that? Yeah, Alish.
The issue is, for the smag, I believe that when you're pouring out, there may be a time in those batches that you have you have 20 or 30 fish still in there, along with some rotev. One of those fish is the baby shark. So there's not enough fish to batel the dagdameh. All of the fish are become aser, and now you have all these ne'asar fish that are in the serving tray with the 120 other fish, and that can create a problem, either aser takol or kedei klipa or kedei nefila.
Okay, very well, very good, very well said. Right. We have those 20 fish that became aser because they were left alone. So if you think about it, what the Siman is actually talking about is the fact that even though we have 60 or even more than 60, and it was theoretically batel at an earlier stage because it was mixed with all these other things, it really could come back to haunt us. That fish, it could be, by the method that you use to remove the fish from the pot, you could create a situation where the shark was with less than 60 other fish, and therefore became a problem, even though it was previously batel.
No, it was never batel, right? Because so long as the fish was there, as long as the fish was there, it wasn't batel because it was a birya, right? It's like once the fish is removed, the flavor of it can be batel, but only if that is amongst shishis.
Right. The flavor of it was batel, and the flavor of it is not batel now, because either way you're removing it. So the flavor of it was batel before, and now the flavor of it is not batel, even though you've removed it once it's on your serving tray. So, but correction accepted. So
but even though you removed it, no, remove the, what's the?
The shark. The
Ah,
shark.
Sure.
Even though you remove the shark, the flavor of it remains in those 20 or 30 little fish. And those 20 and 30 little fish, well, they ruin the other fish. Now, if it's 150 fish, like I said, then why wouldn't we say that the little fish are batel barov? Right? Why wouldn't the little fish be batel barov in the 150, in the 130 or 120 other fish? So I think actually Alan alluded to it, because let's say it again. Why aren't the other fish batel? It's because remember we say min b'mino yavesh b'yavesh is batel barov, and this is yavet is maybe you poured off.
Did you just say min b'mino?
Yeah, yes, we were talking about minnows.
And that's why we don't use shrimp, because shrimps are too small also, Lexi.
No, but a baby shark is like 5 feet when it's born. I think it's probably not, not what we're dealing with either.
All right, well, very baby
Not in the
shark.
documentaries I've seen it by
Not all
grandchildren.
sharks.
Oh,
Apparently, there are baby sharks that are about the size of a human hand.
Thank you. Thank
Really?
you. There's lots of different kinds of sharks.
News you can use.
There's lots of different kinds of sharks, but fine. The example is not important, whether it's a shrimp or maybe it's a sturgeon. Maybe, yeah, a sturgeon, right, is also not kosher. It could be, I won't say a swordfish because that's a machloket in poskim. Anyway, could be an eel. Anyway, so Alan said, well, the 20 or 30 could trafe up or ruin the other ones because it's hot, and the heat will cause what? Well, maybe a kedei klipa or something. Maybe there's some kind of contact between the hot 20 with the hot 130, and they cause like some kind of isser, some kind of klipa maybe. Normally we say that it only in a kli rishon do the slaver transfer, and this is clearly not in a kli rishon.
Right, but we say like irui is mivashal kadei klipa, right? So we have that, and then also essentially part of it depends on whether there is some liquid left at the end with the 20 or 30 to be molich the flavor between the other things.
So this is what I was alluding to before. There's this big machloket basically between what the case is that we're talking about. According to the Beit Yosef, the case is that you're pouring off fish with water, with hot water in those portions. According to the Bach, that's not the case at all. He says if that would be the case, then for sure it would be us. And for sure it would be us because exactly what Lexi is saying. It's irui kli rishon. And irui kli rishon says the Shach in Siman Kuf Hey, Sif Katan Hey. He gives a little summary there of irui, worth looking at, 105.5. So the Shach there says, which is a Sif Bet, he says, yeah, irui is also kedei klipa. So that should be usher. If you have water there, then that should usher it always. So the Bach says, there's no water here. You poured off all the water into a separate vessel, and now you're just pouring dry fish in portions. And on that, there's still a machlok. Alan.
Nachum, the Shach's opinion there is not unanimous, though, right? Isn't there someone who holds that irei kli rishon is like a klisheni and then does not oser kedei klipa?
Yeah, there's a lot of machlok about it.
Majority that goes back way earlier, because I think it goes back to like the Tosfot and how we map this onto Hilchot Shabbos also to an extent. But I think the majority of opinions ends up being that it's mivashal kedei klipa.
Yeah, I think it's Rabbeinu. What is Rabbeinu Tom's opinion?
Rabbeinu Tom's opinion is that it's kli rishon for Shabbos, and that for like this stuff it's mivashal kedei klipa.
Yeah, okay. I'm all right.
I vaguely recall that we studied with Rav Arya, and there was Rabbeinu Tam, Rabbeinu Baruch, and Rashba, right? Like these were the three opinions.
Yeah, I
if I'm
think the
not
Rabbeinu
mistaken.
Tam does not hold like that, Lexi. I think the Rabbeinu Tam holds that Yerui forbids totally. He holds it's like Kli, is that what you said? It's like Kli Rishon, not Kli Klipa. Is that what you were saying, Alice? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think Rashba was like Klisheni, and Rabbeinu Baruch gave the example with when you pour hot water on a chicken, right, or something like that. I studied it many years back.
Yeah, the Rabbeinu Tam is that it forbids totally.
I think so.
If it would be the Beis Yosef, if it would be Rabbeinu Tam and the Beis Yosef, if there's water, then it would be us totally, which fits with what the Beis Yosef is kind of saying. But we don't paskin like Rabbeinu Tam, so it's probably Kedei Klipa. Right, Rabbeinu Tam is that it's totally us. Okay, so let's look at some sources inside. That was just giving you a kind of overview. Make sure we're all on the same page together. Hope that was useful. I just want to let's start looking at the Shulchan Aruch a little bit. We'll start looking a little bit at the Shulchan Aruch. And I'm going to jump around a bit because you can't read all of the stuff that we have here. So, Isaac, you want to read the Shulchan Aruch? We're in Siman 107.
Okay. המבשל ביצים הרבה בקליפתן, לא יוציאם מהמים שנתבשל בהם עד שיצטננו, או ייתן עליהם מים צוננים לצנניהם, ואחר כך יוציאם משום דחי שינן שמה יימצא באחת מהם אפרוח, או היה מוציא מהם קודם שיצטננו, שמה הייתה נשארת תוצאה שיש בה אפרוח, עם האחרונות, והייתה אוסרתן, לפי שלא היה נשאר שם 60 לבטלו. Okay, so somebody who's cooking eggs in their shell, so like hard-boiling eggs, shouldn't take them out of the water that they cooked it in until you've let the water cool down, or you put in enough cold water that it all cooled down. And after that, you can take them out. And the reason we do this is because we're worried that we're going to find one that has like a chicken fetus in it, and so that'll be treif. And if you took them out before the water got cold, maybe you would have like the treif egg left in the pot, and you wouldn't have 60 kosher eggs against it, and to make it batel, and then your eggs would get treif.
Right. In other words, you're taking the eggs out like in groups of 20, let's say, or even groups of 1. And if you made, let's say, 60 eggs, so 62 eggs, right, it has to be, right, remember, eggs are in 61.
Yeah.
So you'd have to have 62 eggs at least. If you had less than 62 eggs, then it's not going to matter, because one chicken fetus is going to, ruin the whole pot. But if you had more than 62 eggs, and then you took it out in portions, it could be you left the chicken fetus in there at the end, and he ruined those eggs, and then, well, he doesn't exactly say what's the problem.
Well, so
he just says there wouldn't be 60 to bevatel it. So the flavor of it, but then why not say? He doesn't say what will be the din in this case.
Yeah, but hang on. As you know, you need 61 versus an egg, right? So why does he say shelo haya nishar sham shishim? Shouldn't it be shishim ve'echat?
Yeah, should be shishim ve'echat.
But why isn't it?
Why does he say shishim?
Yeah,
it's a good question. You should say shishim ve'echat. Yeah. I don't think anybody thought about it. I don't think anybody pointed this out. It would make sense if we're talking about fish. If it's fish, then shishim would.
Sure, but it's not fish.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question.
There's the opinion out there that just fish are batal b'shishim, right? I think it's the Ramban.
You mean the eggs?
The eggs, excuse me, as opposed to the Ramban. But I don't know if the
We don't, but he doesn't pass like the Shulchan Aruch doesn't pass.
again.
Yeah.
So first of all, the first thing we have to look at is that it's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you. But first of all, the Shulchan Aruch is talking about eggs and not about fish. Let's look back at the tour. The tour is our source here, and he's talking about Katav b'Sefer HaMitzvos Dagim Ketanim Shnish Bashlu V'Nimsa Behen Dag Tamei. So he's talking about dag. He's talking about fish. V'yesh Osrim Afilu V'Mekirov V'Zarko. There are those that forbid it, even if you took it out. V'yesh Shishim Levatal, and there was 60 there. Lefi. So here it says Osrim. Yesh Osrim. The Shulchan Aruch did not say v'ze asur. He didn't say anything about what the din is. He just said an eitzah tova. He just said you should put the water in to cool it down, or you should wait for it to cool off. He didn't say what exactly is the din. He just says if there might not be 60 there to mevatel it, and then what? And what if there is 60 to? I mean. And then what? Is he how is he possibly? Because we are educated and we see the tour who says yesh osrim afilu makirov zarkova yesh shishin levatala. There are those that forbid it, but then he's about to say yesh matiri. It's a machloket. There's two different opinions. Which way did he go? Which way did the Beit Yosef go? So let's just read it. Continue in the tour. Yesh osrim afilu makirov zarkova yesh shishin levatala. Lefi kishemari mayim. Chachamim, when you pour off the hot water, lefamim besof heirui im ma'at mayim yishaer hadag hatamei im esrimosh o im shoshim dagim. Because maybe as you're pouring off the water, the fish will remain there with 20 or 30 fish only. Now, this language is unclear what he means. Are you pouring off just water? It's possible that you're pouring off just water, and when he says the fish will remain there with 20 or 30 fish, what he means is that you pour it off like, let's say, half of the water. So in the bottom of the pot is that dag tamei, and he's in hot water with 20 or 30 fish, and the other fish are above him, and they don't join in to create a din of bittul because they're outside of the water, and that. We learned that from the Gemara of Tipat Chalav, where a drop of milk hits a piece of meat, and if it's outside of the pot, says Tosfot, or it's in the pot, but it's outside of the water, it doesn't join with the other pieces. So here, these pieces won't join with us to help because they're outside of the water. Or it could mean that you're pouring off mamish, the water, and the fish together. And those are the two different ways to read what this actually means here. So he says, wait a second. So he says, v'nesru. So those 20 or 30 get forbidden. V'chozrim hamayim v'nogiim l'kol hadagim. That's the part that's not so clear. V'chozrim hamayim v'nogiim l'kol hadagim. And the water goes and touches all the fish. What water? What water is touching all the fish? So maybe you're poured off some of the water, and then you straightened out the pot, and then it swished around, and now it forbid all of it. Or maybe you poured off the water with the fish, and then the irui onto the rest of the fish forbid those other fish. Not so clear what exactly is the problem.
Well, it does say that when you're pouring it out, there's a bit of water that's left over at the bottom of the pot, right? And I think that's the water he's talking about. So basically, as you're pouring, there's a certain moment, even if you're pouring it in one shot, at a certain point, there no longer will be 60 fishes in the water. There'll be 20 or 30 of them with the non-permitted. The water that's within this mixture is also rendered tamei. And once you finish pouring the whole thing, you no longer have 60 because the water and the fish creates an isur. That's the way.
But how did that water get up to the other 80 fish that weren't in the water?
Well, because you could say, because there's a little water left at the bottom, right? That water is tamei, and then when you pour it out, the water just touches everything.
When as you poured off some of the water, And then when you pour off the rest of the water sort of rubbed against the other fish at the top of the pot and forbid
So you
them.
could have said that the Isur or the 20 or 30 fish of Isur don't touch the other fish, whatever. You could have understood that, but like the problem here is that there's some water left over and the water kind of propagates the Isur through the whole dish.
Yeah, so that's why I say you jiggle the pot around. That's what I meant, kind of. Maybe you finish pouring off the water and then the water poured. Not clear exactly. V'yesh matirin, and there are those that permit mipnei she'otan etzrim v'shloshim shenisharim batelin berov tarovet. They're batel against the rov. Ki lo shayach lomar biria lo batela. Because you can't call it a biria, ella bebiria shenestra machmat atzma, because a biria has to be essentially forbidden and not something that just absorbed flavor. These fish are permitted fish, they just have a flavor, so they're not biria, so they can be batal barov. But what about this idea that that they touch the other fish? Velone asra machmat blia is okay. That's acher. Okay. Ve'ein chozrim. Here he says ve'ein chozrim ve'osrim ashar shebemachvat. Why don't they go and forbid the rest of the ones that are in the pot? Afal pi shenogim behen. Even though they behen hamayim, even though the water is touching them, why not? That's what the other one says they do. Lefi she'iser hanivla ein isuro machmat atzmo. Because when something is usher only because it absorbs something, eno chozer v'nivla b'yavesh kim al yedei bishul. Because you need to have bishul in order for it to forbid the other ones. It almost sounds like he's saying irui. It's almost like he's saying like this, that irui, when we said that irui causes a kedei klipa, that's only when it's mamish isser, not when it's something that's just absorbed in Isser. And that only happens when it's Bishul, which is a Chiddush, which is a new din that we didn't really think about. Yeah, Aaron.
First, apologies for being late, and if this was answered before I got here, no need to answer it again. The language of Hanan, for the most part, does not show up here, but there does seem to be the idea that we haven't encountered before, that the plita of a biria could make something else, not just asur, insofar as it been balea and isser, but that it might be both totally asur and even asur enough to be osir without the language of Hanan. Did we go through that already or no?
Well, you're saying specifically because it's biria or because it's a treif item, because it's a non-kosher item?
Right, we haven't seen the language, like the idea that the dagim that touch the dag tameh might be able to oser other dagim would seem to be, if you hold Hanan, we haven't actually seen the chiluk between.
Right, I don't think it necessarily. We'll see that there is some opinion. There is one opinion that mentions Hanan as being a factor here, but
just the idea that you would need the idea that you would need bittul baruv at all, as opposed to just having, once the whole thing is poured in, and you would just still need bittul against the plita of the thing. In a non-Hanan world, it's not obvious that there would be any issue besides the initial plita. So it seems that there's something about the plita of a biria that's more chamor, even for those who don't say Hanan b'shar isurim, than a regular.
I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go that way. I wouldn't go that way. I don't think it has to do with biria. I think if it would be a shark that was cut in half, be the same din. I don't think it's because it's a period.
Well, I think part of it is also though that if we say that when it remains with the like 20 or 30 in such a way that it meaningfully imparts flavor to those, and then those get mixed with the others, since they're not actually being properly cooked with all the others, I think part of the idea is actually that each of those, the flavor of that one dag tameh isn't going to be then evenly dispersed through everything else that's in the ka'ara, because that's not how they're being mixed. So you'll have these 20 or 30 dagim that have a bit of dag tameh flavor in them, like, and are potentially able to impart that to some extent. Like they are not totally permissible things, but can't fully be just like mixing that flavor with everything around them.
Right, because I think you're correct. That only in Bishul do we have the privilege to say that it's spread everywhere. When we don't have Bishul, we don't know how much it spreads. It spreads Kedei Klipa in Irui. So that Klipa could be in some fish, it got, Klipa on part, one side of the fish got it, and the other one, the other side. So therefore, it's kind of, I don't know if you ever read the book Cat in the Hat Comes Back. But he has a spot and he keeps on, spreading it around and chopping it up into little pieces, but then the pieces get other places, and eventually his whole front yard is covered with red spots from that one thing. But it's not because he created any more redness. It's just because it became thinner and thinner, and therefore was able to cover a greater area. So I think that's kind of what's going on here. I don't necessarily think there's a duplication of any Isser. It's just that the Isser is spreading.
But just on that, if the issue is that there is something where there was real bishul, where there wasn't 60, and now it's being combined in like a partial bishul, where maybe there's 60 now, but the things were already muvushal, got the flavor, and now the flavor is not going to be homogeneously imparted. It seems from the lashon of what we just read that actually, if it were true bishul through irui, it would be more chamor. But it would seem like if there were true bishul through irui, that would actually mean that the flavor was being fully spread out among the original 60 that we originally had.
No, but even a lot of the people who hold that irui is mavashal still only hold that it's mavashal kedei klipa, right? That like that's if you say irui is mavashal at all, there's still a major, like the major opinion of like the Tosfot and the Smag and whatnot is that it's only mavashal kedei klipa, which wouldn't be even dispersal. Right. And so this is also part of what you have when you have all these pieces, and like it's not chanan in the sense that like you need now to be measuring against each of those dag tamez like shishim, right? But that because there's still forbidden something here and it can't be removed fully and it can't be fully dispersed. That's why we need the yavesh bitul.
Wait, let's divide this up. First of all, there's an opinion. If you notice, it says nivla biyavish ki'im al yedei bishul. The Torah seems to be saying it's a case of yavish, which is not irui at all. So that sort of goes like the Bach's opinion. The Bach says that that it's really a case of yavish. You poured off all the water ahead of time. So all he's saying here is that when hot things touch each other, when you in a klisheni, the flavor doesn't spread evenly. If you learn like the Beit Yosef, that Lav Dafka when he says Yavish, maybe he means Irui here, then also it doesn't spread evenly, just Kedei Klipa. So either way, we're saying it's only Kedei Klipa, and therefore you don't get the ability, you don't have the luxury of saying it's spread everywhere, and therefore it's Batal B'Shishim. So I don't think you have to say Chanan. I don't think we're expanding the amount of Isser. We're just unsure of where that Isser is going.
Because the difference is that we're not trying to batel just the flavor anymore. We're trying to batel like the fishes that have been like that have the dag tameh. Because we remove the dag tameh, right?
No, but we have 60 again. We have rove against those fish. That we not a problem.
That's what I'm saying, right? That's why we need the rove, right? Is because we're no longer actually talking, especially in the yavesh paradigm. We're not even talking about bateling literally like the tom of the dag tameh is spread out. We're talking about bateling these 20 or 30 fish that remained.
Well, there's two things we have to do. We have to have rove to mevatel them in the sense that they are for sure usser, and we need rove against that. Then, even if we have rove, we could have a problem because maybe they impart bits of flavor into the other fishes, and that we also don't say. That's what the Matirim say. But the case starts off that we have rove, and that's why we get to the question of what I asked, which is how many fish are we talking about? And the answer is really going to be, if you think about it, 122 maybe. I'm not sure exactly, 122, I think. In other words, you need to have the worst case scenario would be that the fish remain with 59 other fish and ruin them. And now you pour those fish into the other pot, and this, of course, is the original fish. That's 60. This the shark plus 59 fish. Plus, now that you pour that into the other pot, there's got to be 60 against the 59. So, because we're going to take out the shark. So that comes to 100.
No, it would be like
20
60
total.
times the 59, not 60 against the 59, no?
No, we need rove. We need rove
Oh, okay.
against 59. We just need rove because it's min b'mino.
Right.
So we just need rove. So we'll have, the only case we can be talking about is 120 fish. If it's less than that, then we're gonna have a problem no matter what. Because we don't know, when he poured off the water in portions, we don't know what portions they were. Maybe the worst case scenario occurred, which would be that he poured off, he had 70 fish and he poured off 30 fish. Now 40 became usser. Now when you pour the 40 onto the 30, you have rove isser. So that's not gonna be permitted. The only machloket is when there's 120 fish or more.
Nachum, just to go back to Aaron's point, and I think I missed something here. You said that the amount of isser has not actually expanded, but if that's the case, there at the end of the day there should be no real problem at all, right? Because if you have more than 120 fish, there's even if some of the 20 or 30 fish they got ne'asar, how are they then the total amount of isser that's present in all of those fish is not, there's no more isser than there was before, right? So it shouldn't be able to battle. It shouldn't be able to make everything usser. The only way that there's a problem is when you say these 20 or 30 fish have acquired a power to oser.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Oser other fish, right? Which is.
I don't agree. I don't agree. There's a case of a pot we're going to learn later where a tipa falls on the outside of a pot, and I don't have to get to that case. I can just say in our case that, like we're saying, we don't know where the piece is, where the tom is. The tom went into some of the fish. We don't know where exactly it went. The shark had a certain value, and its flavor went into various fish by various amounts, and we don't know which fish got more or less flavor from that shark. 30 of them got flavor from that one fish, so they're usser. They're all usser for sure. And now some of that flavor may go out of those fish and into the other fish. It's tam nivla that then exudes out of the fish and goes into the other fish. But we don't know if it went evenly. If we would mivashel them, I mean, that would be a solution. You would pour all the 30 into the other pot and then boil it up. Then there's no problem here. If I took the fish and poured them into another pot, which was on the fire, and boiled them, even if I did it in 3 or 4 steps, then but nobody says that's a problem, because we're not worried about chanan. See, that would be chanan. If you're worried about chanan, you would say that case is usser, because now I have 30 fish, and the flavor of those 30 fish is going into the 40 fish and ruining them. But no, I'm saying nobody says that's a problem. If I poured it from one flame to the other flame into 2 different pots that are on the flame, then the flavor will, just like it spread around in the first pot, it'll spread around in the second pot, and there'll be batal b'shishim.
Got it.
That's why we're specifically talking about pouring it into a serving tray where there's no bishul. And once there's no bishul, we don't have the luxury of saying the flavor spreads evenly.
Right. We can't do bittul because there's been no bishul, and therefore no chance for the flavor to uniformly distribute.
Exactly. That's the way I understand it. So that it's not a question of chanan at all. And that fits very nicely because the Tur does not hold chanan. And the Beit Yosef doesn't hold chanan.
Right. There's both the question of bishul and whether we're concerned about flavor transfer at all. And also, again, the very fact of we need to batel the physical things here that have that flavor in them, as opposed to just the flavor of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We have to do 2 things. We have to have 60. We have to have majority against the tray fish, and we also have to have no flavor transfer. No, how do you say, a sporadic flavor transfer. And that's what the Yesh Matirim say. The Yesh Osrim say, no, there is sporadic flavor transfer. Okay, I think we've discussed that nicely. I have a certain order that I wanted to go to, so let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. And we see in the Shulchan Aruch that he doesn't even talk about fish. He just talks about eggs. And he seems to ignore the case of fish. Maybe it's the same. Maybe the reason he doesn't talk about fish is because he holds like the Yesh Matirim, so why bother even telling you? And that the only problem is with eggs. And why are eggs different? Well, we'll see that in a minute. All right, but first I want to show you in the Shach 3 different opinions.
So quick question, and that might be totally off base here, but maybe the eggs are the ultimate Kedei Klipa case.
You always peel them.
Exactly. Like here in this case, like actually, like he was mevashal them with their klipa on, right? So maybe in the mind of the Shulchan Aruch, the problem with the fish could only be kedei klipa, and eggs being
but
the
then you should
ultimate
mention
kedei
the
klipa.
fish. Then call v'chomer. He should mention the fish.
Why?
And tell
No,
us the
if
fish
you have
are
a case
usher.
that if you have a case that encompasses everything, why should you like mention other cases?
No, because if the case you're saying, first of all, you're saying that the eggs he's permitting because anyway you're going to remove klipa, but by the fish you can't remove klipa because it's so small and nobody's going to start, taking klipa off of these little tiny sardines. So the fish should be usher and the eggs should be mutter. So you should mention that. I can't learn one from the other. Just because the eggs are mutter doesn't tell me anything about the fish. So wait, let's look at the shach. Sarah, can you look at the shach for us? I'm not going to read it all, but we'll jump around a little bit. Let's start at the beginning. He goes on where it says, "V'im lo asake." If he didn't do it, where is that? That's in the Ramah, actually. V'im lo asake, ela irau tam lekara. I'm sorry, before you read, I'm reading the Ramah. Im lo asake, ela irau tam lekara v'nimsa achat mehen treifa. And what does the Ramah say? Yesh osrim hakol d'chashinan shema hatreifa nishar lebesof. We're worried that maybe the treifa egg remained in the pot last and forbid 30 or 40 eggs. V'lo hayashishim bekara, bekadera in the pot, levatel. V'nes ramasha bekadera and everything. V'chol zever oser kol masha bekara. And then he throws in v'ken dagim ketanim shenimsim dag tameh. He throws in the fish also. V'lo irak kulam b'pam achat el toch kara el toch hakara. He didn't do it all at once. Das yesh lachush shema nishar isu lebesov. And then those ones are going to forbid the others, just like the tour. V'yesh matirin. But there are those that permit. So he brings back. He says, first of all, he says the same din is by fish. And then he says, you should know that there are those that forbid and there are those that permit.
Okay.
Wait, yesh osrima. Again, what does he think about what is the psak? V'yesh matir, what does he think the psak of the Shulchan Aruch is? Not clear. But what is his psak? His psak is, yesh matir recall, inyan, de lo machzin an isur, lomar, shenishara isur below shishim. We're not going to create this fantasy that perhaps it remained by itself. And we're going to hope for the best. V'ken ikar, afilu l'data osrim, v'ken ikar. That's the halacha, yesh matiri. In other words, he holds that it's mutter in the end, even if you don't do it. So he could be reading the Shulchan Aruch also is agreeing with him that it's mutter, is just this is an eitzah tova by the eggs to pour it off. V'ken ikar v'afilu l'data osrim. And even according to the ones that forbid, ein le'asor ha'kelim, you shouldn't forbid the pot itself. Should pashlu bo. Because we leave the pot as it in its chazaka of being kosher. Fine. So the Ramah sort of brings in the tour for us, and tells us two different opinions. It tells us the Yesh Matiri, and it's a little bit unclear what he holds, how he understands the Beit Yosef. I mean, how he understands the Mechaber. I think he understands the Mechaber to say it's mutter. like he says. Okay, so that's just on that, on the im lo asakain, which is sort of really.
Is it possible that the Machaber or that the Ramah thinks that the Machaber thinks differently about eggs and fish, and that the Ramah is just disagreeing with the Machaber about the fish case?
Yeah, we're gonna yes, we're gonna talk. I'm gonna show you exactly that opinion. Yeah, we'll see.
Right, that seems like a possible interpretation.
Why? Well, so the eggs we're gonna say are what? Are more makil or more machmir?
For the Ramah, in other words, we're gonna on the interpretation. I was just saying that the eggs are more machmir for the Shulchan Aruch, but but that
the Ramah puts them all together.
That's the Ramah puts them all together and disagrees. Yeah,
that could be the final way of interpreting it. Yes.
Because otherwise, I mean, I think what's compelling about that reading is it just explains why the Ramah.
Well, why didn't the Mechaber mention fish? Why didn't the Mechaber mention fish? Because he holds that fish are really mutter. And the only problem is by eggs. Dafka.
Yeah, and then the Ramah has to come and say that he disagrees about that.
What?
And then the Ramah has to come and say, you thought that eggs and fish were different.
I think
in fact, no.
I think they're the same and that they're all mutter. So yeah, that is a very nice way to read it. But it's not the only way to read it. But yes, let's go back to the all right. Yes, it's possible to say that. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. I never know whether they go there right now. There's a place in the tour in the Beit Yosef where he talks about eggs.
It looks like Aaron wanted to say something on this point.
Yeah,
before
Aaron.
I read this long delayed shach.
Just on that, it seems like the Taz brings the Torah's Chata, where the Ramah does not seem to think that the Shulchan Aruch thinks that eggs b'di eved are more. They may think that they're more chamor l'chatchila, but certainly that the Ramah thinks b'di eved. The Shulchan Aruch thinks that the eggs are also fine.
All right. Well, as long as we're talking about this, why? Somebody tell me outside why should eggs be more machmir? Which is whether they're all the same din, right? So, Aaron, what do you say?
You cook fewer eggs at a time than tiny fish.
Exactly. So that's the basic opinion that we'll see, that the eggs you cook in the smaller batches. So it's not that it's really a difference in din. It's just that the reality is different. The reality of egg cooking is that you cook a small amount of eggs, and therefore you won't have what? You won't have 120 eggs. Fish, you'll have 180 eggs. You'll have more than 120. Eggs, you may have 80 eggs, but you won't have more than 120. If you have 80 eggs, you could have a problem. Because when you ruin the 59 eggs, you don't have 60 to mavatal them in rov. No, and nobody cooks 120 eggs. Most people generally cook less than that. But by little fish, you bring a net from the fisher, you go out to the lake and you pull in a whole mess of fish with your net. You may have thousands of fish there. So the fish is more a reality that you'll have a majority against the forbidden one, whereas the eggs are not. All right, let's go back to the Bach.
Okay.
To the Shach.
Shach. Okay. V'im lo asakin. I'm in the right place?
Yeah.
Okay. V'im lo asakin v'chulei ad sofaga. Lefi ani gudjati mochach deriva v'siato shehevi sefer atruma v'amordechai v'hagot shari dura v'asmag v'hagot maimoniot v'ator eicha de'ira harotev mitchila lekli v'lo hadagim afilu hachi kulam asurin dechoshishin shema nishar hadag tameh b'tzad mata basof shemitma'et harotev al yidei irui imat ma'im verotev im kain im esri moshlishim dagim o yoter ad bachot mishishim v'im kain nasru otan esrim v'shloshim afal pi shem ma'ara lebasof lekol harotev lekli.
Wait. Stop. So first of all, the way I'm marking this to myself is this is Dat Riva. We're going to see three different opinions. So the first opinion is Dat Riva and
lots of other people
and his cohort.
So
the case is what?
The case is you first poured out all of the liquid.
All the water. That's the way the Bach understood it. In other words, the Riva holds that you poured off all the water and you just have a pot of fish now.
And
even so, it's still going to be usher.
Because there's still going to be, you could have the dag tameas at the very, very bottom with like some tiny little bit of liquid, and then that will transfer its flavor to whatever's in the pot and then to whatever everything else, and then all bets are off.
Right. In other words, those two, and that rotev is you tried to, I guess you have to say you tried to pour off all the water, but you left a little bit in there, or while you were pouring it off, maybe the 20 or 30 got forbidden in the bottom of the pot.
Yeah, I think it has to be that you were right, that there's some movement when there's a tiny bit of water at the bottom. I think that
right. Even if you succeeded in pouring it all off, there was a moment where there wasn't. And then those 20 or 30, what do they do?
Then so that usher is 20 or 30, and then the 20 or 30 like can't be batel in the rest.
Sorry, sorry, just to make sure I understand, are we talking about a case that where it's only batel b'shishim because of the water? Well, it seems to be the shach is saying that you pour out all the water, right? And what's left over is 20 or 30 fish and the fish tamar, which means
no, there's 1,000 fish there.
Okay,
there's 1,000 fish there.
Okay, fine. So that I misunderstood that. Okay, perfect.
There's 1,000 fish there, but in the process of pouring it off, at a certain moment there was the tray fish along with 59 other fish.
But that's the Bet Yosef then.
No, because you poured out all the water.
No, the Bet Yosef.
In the Bet Yosef, you're pouring the water and the fish at the same time.
Exactly.
Okay, so you first pour the water and then you pour the fish, and like while you're pouring out the fish at a certain time. Okay, fine. So it's a 3-step process. Okay, got it.
So I have also a question because it seems so. I'm confused about the kli. If it's like kli sheni, kli rishon. So it seems that according to Shach, the isur happens in kli rishon, right?
This is don't say according to the Shach. Say according to the Riva.
Okay, according to the Riva.
So according to the Riva, the whole thing is remaining in the Kli Rishon. Nothing has left the Kli Rishon except the water. And in that process, you poured off the water. 59 at the bottom got forbidden, and then those 59 kind of got mixed around with the other pieces and forbid those other ones.
Right, but when we read it above, so it seems like that it happens in the Kli sheni also, right? Like the
yes, it's a different description.
So it's a different description altogether. Okay, good.
What would he? I mean, now you have to ask the theoretical question. What would he say about the case of pouring it into a different pot? Well, what would he say about the case where if it's already forbidden in the Kli Rishon, if I pour it into the Kli Sheni, it's still forbidden. It's already
right. I think
everything already happened. If I
it has to be that because for him all the bad stuff is all happening in the Kli Rishon as you're pouring out the water. It doesn't matter whether you pour it to something else, because whatever's going to happen already happened.
No, the only question to ask, exactly, everything already happened already. It's already ruined. Doesn't matter what you do from now on. But the only question would be, what if you poured it with water and fish like the Bet Yosef describes? What would the Riva say about that? What would the Riva say about that? And we don't know, but maybe he would also answer that. Okay, so now skip to I don't know if you finished. The key line here is V'achar kach chozer otan esrim v'shloshim v'osrin b'negiatan shar dagim shebemachvat that are in the original Kli Rishon. They sort of get swooshed around and forbid the other fish in the Kli Rishon shemunachim alehen, that are on top, right? The ones that didn't get traced up are on top, but they're going to get traced up now. B'machvat ba'odan chamim, because they're in this pot and it's still hot and they're moving around and they're forbidden. So that's all. That's the Riva opinion. Now, if you skip in my edition 4 lines,
there's an assumption that they all touch each other.
Yes, these are friendly fish.
Okay.
Okay. They all touch each other. Okay, now go to skip 4 lines, Rachel, and it says V'dat Rabbeinu Baruch. This is the second opinion. If you're marking it, if you want to remember what the opinions are. Rabbeinu Baruch.
Hold on 1 second, I'm just finding it. Okay, V'dat Rabbeinu Baruch, Baal Sefer HaTruma, V'siyato, Shehivi Kol HaPoskein L'shem Shemaskimim L'dato, Hu Denihi De'ika L'mecha Shene'asru Hakol.
By the way, just to point out here, this is you're all a little bit of like a spoiler alert. He says Kol HaPoskein Maskimim L'dato. So that's going to be the psak. Is going to be like Rabbeinu Baruch, not like Riva. So go ahead.
Okay. De'ika l'mecha shene'asru ha'ezri moshloshim lebasof ha'irui mikol makom b'teilim berov lefisha derech lihiyot harbe dagim k'tanim de'yesh rov neged otan shene'asru ve'ein otan. So we just ve'ein otan shene'asrim chozim v'osrin hashar b'nigatan.
Right.
So basically, Rabbeinu Baruch assumes that even if it turned out that there was this tamei fish at the very kind of at the end, you cook a ton of tiny fish together, and the fish are so tiny that you're never going to end up in a situation where you make rov of the fish asur, and so you don't have this problem.
Exactly.
Just like it's just a metzias point, right?
And he says, well, you go on a little bit. They don't. Why don't they be contagious to the neighboring fish? They all touch each other. Why aren't they contagious like Riva says? So that's what he answers. The kevan. Because they're not like in themselves asur, they're only asur because of their previous history of contact with the original tamei fish, and that's not sufficient for them to transfer anything meaningful without rotev. So you could say, by the way, if we run it back to the question that we asked about Hanan, that Aaron asked, you could explain the machloket here as that the Riva holds Hanan here, and not only does he hold Hanan, he holds. There's different opinions about what Hanan is, but the Ramban holds that I'm just remembering. The Ramban holds that Hanan actually turns the whole thing into Isser because it gets a din of Isser now, and therefore it's not called in this case says the Riva. It's not called that it just got balua in it. It's called mamish. It is Isser Atzmo, and maybe that's how the Riva is learning, and that's why it forbids the other things. And says Rabbeinu Baruch, no. Even if you say Hanan, it's still a balua in it. It's not an Isser Atzmo, and therefore it's not contagious. The negia to the other pieces doesn't affect them. Okay. That's the second. So yeah, go ahead. Question.
Rav Nachum, are the Riva and the Sefer HaTruma necessarily just? It would seem like if the piluk between them was specifically about Hanan, that either the Shach or one of the other Nosikalim would frame the debate in terms of Hanan. It seems like I think we see later in the Shach, or here in the Shach, when the pieces are Osir, it seems like it's more like Lexi said. It's the Isser Balua, it's like a Fumra. The Isser Balua might leave the fish that were already Asurim enough to impart time. It's possible that they would do that in a way such that
well, it's not framed. It's not framed. You're saying they don't frame it this way or that way. They didn't frame it at all. They just said the words. They just said the words. One holds that it does in the Gia, and one holds that it doesn't. It's up to the Achronim to debate why they disagree. But nobody gives enough explanation of exactly why.
But given that the Shach holds Hanan, if the debate between the Riva and the Sefer HaTruma were about Hanan...
No, I'm not saying, you misunderstood me. I'm not saying that one holds Hanan and one doesn't hold Hanan. I'm saying they both hold Hanan, but they have different definitions of Hanan. I'm giving you an Achronim answer, a kind of later answer. That they both hold Hanan, but but they understand Hanan in a different way. One holds like the Ramban, who holds that Hanan turns the substance of the formerly mutter thing into now het Eser. And the other does not hold like the Ramban. He holds that no, it remains, it's Aser, it's Hanan. We treat it as Isser, but it's not actually Isser.
I don't think it's necessarily so much about...
That is what some Achronim say. You take it, I mean, I'm not going to say that that's the only way to learn. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
I think it's less about the Hanan Dafka and more about the principles around like Ein Hana Asar Yachola Sor right? That like this question of just because something has been Ne'asar itself and like it itself, you wanted to eat it, would have to be batel in a certain way, doesn't necessarily mean.
And how does the Riva learn? He holds it does. He holds
right. The Riva clearly thinks that it does, right?
Then that's against the Gemara. I mean, that's against that principle. So he doesn't hold by that principle. That's a big chiddush to say. He doesn't hold by that principle. But you could say that. It's also a possibility. I'm just saying that. Yeah, you could say that. You could say that. Well, let's go to the third opinion.
That just seems to be like, it is a bit weird, right? Because that is the principle. Like, it doesn't actually make sense that these things that are only aser from baluatam.
I'm trying to explain the riva, right? It's whatever you're going to say, it's going to be dochak because it's a difficult thing to say. Yes, what you said is dochak, and what I said is dochak. So choose your poison. Yeah. Nobody paskins like the Ramban that I was mentioning. So that would also be a problematic opinion. But yeah, it's strange that he says, in other words, it sounds very nice what the Reinu Baruch says, that it's also a bit of a chiddush. We didn't know that really. We didn't know that things that are usher because they absorbed isser don't transfer further. Well, we did kind of. We knew it from the Gemara and Tifat Challah.
We did that. We did that like a Siman or two ago, right? And this is especially if we end up talking about a scenario where we really do think that like whatchamacallit, we do think the time for achlat, then the remains of the rotev are gone, right? Then how is there even being like the proper flavor transfer of already only balua flavor to some other piece?
Anyway, there's two opinions. There's the opinion of the Riva that says that it does Asr B'Negia, and the Rabbeinu Baruch that says it doesn't Asr B'Negia. Now let's go back to the Beit Yosef. And I want to look at this opinion of eggs. Just a second. Yeah, let's go to Beit Yosef's opinion of eggs. So look in the Beit Yosef of Aleph, and he says, "V'katuv od b'smag." And this is kind of going on the same opinion that well, you see, according to the Riva, eggs and fish are all going to be usher, because they're all usher. Once if the fish are usher, then certainly the eggs are usher. But according to Rabbeinu Baruch, the fish are not going to be usher. But what does he say about eggs? So that's this. B'katuv od b'smag, omnam beitzim shenitbashlu v'nimsa ba'achat mehen efroach otam, hakol asur de'ein regilot levashel beitzim kol kach b'yachad sheyeh 20 beitzim o 30 shene'esru b'telim b'tarovet berov shel heter. So that's the idea, that you don't normally cook eggs so much that you'll have 60 against the ones that became asur, even according to Rabbeinu Baruch. And now if you go to the last 3 lines of that same Beit Yosef, he says, V'od haya omer Rabbeinu Shimshon. You see that? Like, it's kind of the very end there, the very end. Thank you. The V'od haya omer Rabbeinu Shimshon, that's the third opinion. Tam acher lahatir, a different reason to matir. Sheyesh lanu lomar de isura beruva ita k'da'amrinan bezvachim. Like we say in the Gemara in Zvachim, Hilchach, ein litlot shebesofa irui im me'at mayim nishar sham hadag tamei ad kan lashon. So he says, this is a third opinion. He says, we don't assume that the fish remained with the 20 or 30. What do we assume? We assume it was in the top part of the pot, let's say, where it was always with 60. In other words, when the water level went down to the level that was less than 59, so the fish was above that line and therefore was left high and dry and not forbidding the other ones that were at the bottom. Because of this idea that we say it's in the rove.
If we're in the world of the Beit Yosef, aren't we saying that the water is being poured out in batches? So there's never going to be fish that are outside of the water entirely, right?
Okay, so even if you say so if you say according right, so thank you. So if you say like the Beit Yosef, they're pouring in batches with water and fish together, so the fish got poured out in the beginning, and it remained with a lot of kosher fish, and the problem never started. So then, what would he say about eggs? I mean, first of all, can somebody explain this to me? It doesn't quite make sense to me 100%. Why is this a hectare? So it's in the majority. So it never got started. We never had a situation where we had 60, where we had less than 60 against it. But what if there was only 80 fish? So then it could be in the majority, but the majority is only 50.
But when it's in the 50, it's not actually being mevushal. Once it gets poured out through Iruya, it's not really bishul. Maybe it's osir de klipa.
No, but maybe it's with the 50. But maybe in other words, it's not enough. What if it's with the 50 at the bottom? In other words, if there's only 70 fish and I pour it off 20, so now if we say it's at the bottom of the pot, that's with the majority. The majority is at the bottom. So you have to say, no, we're not talking about it. It has to be a case again of more than 120, right? Doesn't have to be a case of more than 120. So that, let's say it's 130, 180, 1,000. I poured off 800 fish and it was with the 800. And when they finally answered 20 or 30, those 20 or 30, they are not the majority. But that only makes sense if I got 800 fish. If I got only 120 fish or only 119 fish, then even if it's with the majority, that could be less than 59. And it could forbid them.
I think it's saying something different and less literal, right? It's just making it's making a comparison, which is that like, because in general, we assume that the Isur is in the rove, right? So the idea is just that we don't have the chazaka that we have the chazaka that the fish is not in the problematic place. It's not about like literal rove or not. It's just like, because we have a general principle from the Sugya and Zvachim that the Isura is in the rove, we can kind of extrapolate from that.
It's kind of like
the Tameh one is always in the okay place.
It's like particle physics. You're saying it's like particle physics. You're saying that when I have like when I poured 40 off, well, you're saying I poured 40 off, I had 60 in the pot, but I mean, I still have the numbers issue. It jumps from one side to the other, but still, I don't understand how it works. Right, it's not in a problematic way, but if I only have 70 fish, explain to me how it works. Where is it? When I pour off 30, and now I got 30 and 40, it's somewhere, but it's either with the 30 or with the 40, and either way, it is a problem. How does
can't we have like bitul berov? It's considered like min bemino, like bitul berov, because I add all the rest of the fish then later. So if they were in the first cohort of fish, so.
Right, you have to say like this. Wait a second. I think you have to say like this. That it's in the like you said, it's in the first cohort of fish. It's in the first pouring, and in the first pouring, it's in a klisheni. Like Alan said, we're pouring it in a klisheni. And in a klisheni, ain't no mavasha. It's all, that's not called cooking. Maybe it does klipa, but it's in the klisheni now. even with the 30 or the 40 in the klisheni, it doesn't do anything. It stayed in the pot as soon as it left immediately. It left immediately. Let's say it was the first one that went out. It was the first one that went out, and then the other one's poured on top of it. But they're heter. Heter on top of Isser, it's Irui, but it's Irui of Heter, so it doesn't do anything. So maybe something like that. We just assume that it went out first.
Is there also an option where because we're in the world where we're pouring the liquid and the fish at the same time, that the liquid contribute to the volume? So you don't have to have this issue of like a certain number of fish, as long as you have just like a lot of sauce or whatever.
But still, you still have to talk about volume. So then you're still gonna have how much. I can call it 60 fish, or I can call it 60 volume units, 60 liters. Whatever.
Right. Okay.
It's either the same issue. I think you have to. I think it basically
it has to go first. Basically,
it has to go first. Basically, that's the point. It has to go first.
And aren't we talking about chamin for the Bet Yosef? If we're talking about chamin, like the water, like it's part of the dish, right? It's not just the fish. Like the Bet Yosef start off saying that we shouldn't read water, we should read chamin, right? And if we read chamin, like the liquid element is part of the volume to be mevatel the fish. That should be like taken in consideration.
Yeah, fine. We can use the liquid, but then it's still the same numerical problem, because we still have to, so we can call it fish plus, how many ounces of this mixture do we have? We don't have to call it fish, we can call it ounces. And then we're combining the water and the Yavni.
It seems to me like I appreciate the like trying to make it work logically, but it seems to me likely that in Rabbeinu Shimshon's mind, we're talking about a situation where it's a really small fish and a whole like big tank of fishes, and therefore like the language of like, oh, you don't have to worry about it being right. What does he say? הילקח אין לתלות שבסוף העירוי אם מעט מים נשאר שם הדג טמא, is like it's really more of a fringe case that they're worrying about.
It's a chashash rachok. It's such a distant,
right.
It's a far away thought. But the problem that I have with that is that my direction that I want to go is to say that eggs are different because of this. That according to Rabbeinu Shimshon, we could matter even eggs. In fact, that's what some of the people that we saw say. And I'm trying
that
to
argument
see if
would be
that's
going in
right.
the opposite
I'm trying
direction.
to investigate whether that's right. Because eggs, we're saying, are not so many. Eggs are 80 eggs. And so that's why I'm examining that question, because I'm trying to see, there are people that say, well, according to Rabbeinu Shimshon, we're just going to assume the best. We're just going to assume the best, and therefore even eggs will be mutter. Even eggs will be mutter when you cook with less than that. And I'm trying to figure out how that works. And I think the way that works is to say that we assume that the usher one went first somehow.
And then because it's a cliche issue, that's what allows us, because it's not in the cliche.
It never was in the cliche when there were not 60.
I didn't look in Zvachim. Did anyone look like in Zvachim? Like it might be one of those cases where we say like, oh, we can eat this one because it might have been in the other one, and then we can eat this one because it might have been in the other one. So they're both prime. Could it be playing a game like that?
Yes, it is like that.
Yeah,
it is like that.
So can we somehow construct something like that for this, where it seems harder, but
it seems harder where you don't
get mixed together.
Right. Seems a little bit different. It seems like a little bit different.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, most people, the most poskim like Rabbeinu Baruch, not like Rabbeinu Shimshon. This middle opinion that you need to have a lot, but it doesn't. But if you do have a lot, then it's okay. As opposed to Riva, who holds that even if you have a lot, it's not okay. And as opposed to Rabbeinu Shimshon, if you have a little, it's okay. It's this middle opinion. Yeah. Questions, comments? All right, let's go.
There's something kind of bizarre to me about saying that, like, the chashash that this tiny little fish remains at the bottom of the pot is too sort of off the beaten path to be something we should be worried about. But basically the only way we can explain the situation in another way that would be okay is for it to be the first fish that drops out. Because that seems like actually a more, like that's like also kind of an equally an opposite.
It
seems like beaten path case.
No, I'm saying if you have like
a right. In other words, I'm trying to go away. I'm trying to avoid saying that Rabbeinu Shimshon is doing fuzzy thinking. You know, I'm trying to nail it down, but maybe it is fuzzy thinking.
I don't think it needs to be the first.
It's the shrug of your shoulders. What, you're gonna worry about this small fish in a big pond?
So that's what I'm saying. That's fuzzy. I call that fuzzy thinking. Say, just assume it worked out somehow. Just assume it worked out. We're not going to think about too many details how exactly it worked out.
I mean, I just feel like it's like the kind of, and we'll see this also like at the later on, I think it's like 113 or something in the Simanim, but like in scenarios where ultimately like we're not that concerned, we're willing to say, oh, we'll kind of assume that it worked out in the more convenient way, right? That ultimately it seems like part of what the Rabbi Shimshon Svara is expressing is that like, look, you're getting rid of the actual Dag Tameh. You have a lot of Dagim here. There's nothing that feels so deeply, viscerally, horrifyingly wrong that could happen here.
Yeah, but what about the eggs?
We feel comfortable enough saying, yeah, it's probably completely fine. Like, obviously, that's not a kind of Svara you use.
And what do you say about the eggs? But what do you say about the eggs? Eggs also?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think the eggs, it's like more, I think the eggs is a little more questionable ground just because of, again, the numerical issue that the like just quantity of potentially forbidden egg to permitted egg, as we've acknowledged, is likely much smaller than of the many little fishes. Which is part of why we have this dispute as to whether that svara does also apply to the eggs. But I think minimally, right, when you're talking about the fish thing, we're saying that like, yeah, the Rabbeinu Shimshon svara is saying, I just don't find this to be such a terrifying case, right? Like that I find it to be like, yeah, it's a thing that could happen, but ultimately it's just not going to be such a wildly problematic thing. I don't think you can say it probably turned out fine.
I think also it depends how we're thinking about at what point in the Irui, if the birya or the problematic thing, at what point in the Irui do we say there's not shishim? Now everything that's still in the pan is aser, right? If we're saying in a formal way, while I'm doing the Irui, as soon as I drop below shishim, then there's a problem. But you might say, I'm actually only counting whether there's bitul. Once I've finished, I've done a pour and I still have half left, I'll pay a bit Yosef, that the question of is there shishim does not kick in until I've sort of done my partial pour of what's in the thing. And now I see what I have left, such that there actually wouldn't be a difference between eggs and fish, and the quantity no longer matters. So if you conceptualize at what time bitul kicks in, differently than we've been conceptualizing it, then Rabbeinu Shimshon makes sense equally for eggs and fish.
Okay, thank you. All right, look, I want to look at the kasha that the Bach brings on the Beit Yosef, and this is basically according to the opinion of Rabbeinu Baruch, which is what we're going to focus on at the moment, which is that it doesn't forbid that's the yesh matirin in the tour, that it doesn't forbid the other ones because they're just balua but something. And he says so if you look in the Bach, I'm skipping now a little bit in the Bach to aval. It says aval habeit Yosef piresh. After he got through saying that there's no water there, he then brings up the Beis Yosef. This is where this is like in my edition, the last word on the line is aval. It's 4 lines from the bottom. That's like the new edition of people have that.
In the Beit Yosef, sorry, you said?
No, in the Bach. Sorry, in the Bach.
Sorry.
In the Bach, 4 lines from the bottom. Last word on the line is aval. There's before it. There's a parenthesis that says like Siman Lamed Hey. Okay, so it says like this: Aval Abeit Yosef Piresh Demairi De'ira Adagi Min HaMachvat Tamchui B'Shtei Pamim. The Beis Yosef says that we're pouring it in 2 pourings into a serving tray. V'chayshinan shema kisheira tchila hadagim nishar dag tameh b'machvat im ma'at dagim. And he's worried that you left the fish in the pot with only a few fish at all in the pot. Not like I said that all the fish are in the pot, it's just a question of the water level, but rather some of the fish are out of the pot, some of the fish are in the pot, and the amount of fish in the pot is not enough. Ume'at mayim v'chule. V'teima gedola. And I say this is I object to this. The lefi perusho, because according to his explanation, the ira hadagim im harotef min hamachva the tamchui b'shnei pa'amim. Because if he's right that he poured it in 2 pourings into the machva, into the serving tray, im came pshita de nesarim kol hadagim. Then Rabbeinu Baruch would say it's usher too. Rabbeinu Baruch would hold that's usher. Rabbeinu Baruch only makes sense according to me, that it's dry, says the Bach. Why? Al yedei shemare besof hadagim hanisharim im mayim shenesru midag tameh. Because this water is forbidden, and it's also being poured, says the Beit Yosef. You're pouring water and fish. And there's a tameh fish there, benehem. Da'az nesru gama dagim she'ira tchila b'tamchui. And also, so the first fish will become asur. It still doesn't say why. Al yedei harotif shemare b'sov. Because of that liquid that you're pouring, the molich ha'isr b'shas ha'irui, because that's called irui, and it's molich the isr, it spreads the isr around in an uneven fashion. B'kol dagim to irui k'kli rishon, because we paskin that irui is like kli rishon l'chumra. So he says, I'm right. In other words, it can't be the case of the Beit Yosef. It would be usher entirely. All the other Rabbeinu Baruch would say it's usher for sure then, because it's only in a case where it's dry things that the negia doesn't actually forbid them. But if it's wet and you're pouring water, Yerui Rishon, it would usher K'nei Klipa. Okay. Got it? Yeah, that's his kasha. That's why that's his basic opinion about why he says that he's right. And that it's not, that it's dry, So now the Shach tries to answer this. We go back. Shach, so I'm back in the Shulchan Aruch. Sorry to jump you around, but they're all talking to each other. These people are all, reading each other and commenting, and so I want to. It's very hard to read this whole shach, so I'm cutting in places. In my edition, where I want to go, the last one on the line is Nun Lamed, Nir Ali. And it's about 10 lines from the bottom of the shach. Before that is a period. And before that, I don't know, tell me if you find it. Before that it says Shari, period, and then it says Nir Ali. Aaron, you got it?
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Can you repeat where it is?
Yeah, it's we're in the Shach, in Kuf Zayin. It says it's like about 10 lines from the bottom. The last one on the line is Nun Lamed. Nir Ali. V'nir Ali. Vav Nun Lamed. V'nir Ali. You got that? Okay. Here, Alice, why don't you read?
ונראה דסבירה לי לבית יוסף דקליפה על כל פנים בעינן.
All right, stop there.
Okay. So it seems to me that the Beit Yosef's opinion is that we need to remove the klipa anyway.
So in other words, his answer is like this. Ein hachanami. Yes, Mr. Bach, you're correct. The Beit Yosef actually agrees with you. He's talking about, that's the case is of irui with water. And when he says it's mutter, when Rabbeinu Baruch says it's mutter, he just means it's mutter, but of course you have to take off klipa. Because of course, irui, of course. In other words, I would say like this. The Bach's kasha is such a strong kasha that he has to give a very dochak answer. This is a very dochak answer that you have to remove klipa. That's the actual opinion of the Beit Yosef. You have to remove klipa. And then how come he doesn't mention the Shulchan Aruch? You could say, well, fish, you always take off the klipa because they have scales. But if we're talking about sardines, I don't think nowadays we have skinless and boneless sardines, but I think in those days you probably ate them whole. So maybe chopped the head off and that was it. So anyway, that's his answer. His answer is that the Beis Yosef really meant that it's when he said it's mutter, he just meant it's not completely asur. Of course, that's what okay. The klipa panim v'lo nechlaku. The next word, alish.
ולא נחלקו אלא לאסור הכל.
They only argued about whether it's all forbidden or partially forbidden.
וכן דעת האיסור.
No, you can stop there. That's all. That's all. But there's one question still left, which is if this is the case, why would Riva say that it's all asur? Riva, remember, says that it's all asur. So if you not because of klipa, because he's got to say it's fully asur, because if the Rabbeinu Baruch says it's mutter, but really it's asur but klipa, then what's Riva's opinion? Riva's opinion must be that it's fully asur. So what is his opinion? So here we could say maybe Riva holds like Rabbeinu Tam that Irui forbids not kedei klipa but in fully. But again, these are, in other words, this is a question.
Rabbeinu Tam does think it's kedei klipa, at least according to the Stam Tosfot.
I think there's other Tosfot. I think there's other places where he says it, but I respect your research. Let's look together more about that. Okay, so that's what I wanted you to see the answer to that. Now I think I want to go back. Yeah, now I want to go back to well, maybe we can skip that. We all understand the Bach's opinion. I was going to say now we should go back and read the beginning of the Bach.
Rav Nachum, do you mind if we take like a 2-minute break?
Yeah, let's take a break. Yeah, fine. Okay, let's take a break for 5. Okay. So I'm going to skip the Bach. We talked about the Bach enough. And we'll go back to the Shach. Here, so Alish, I'll stick with you. The 6 or 7 lines from the bottom. The first one on the line is V'ken mashma Torah's chatas sham. Period. You got it, Ruben? Great. Andre, you got it? Yeah. V'ken mashma b'Torah chatas sham. Then it says for the Indian dinner. That's where I want to start. We gotta get a din out of this all. We have to decide what the halacha is, not just philosophize about what all these things mean. So go ahead, Alish. We're for the Indian dinner in the Shach. It's 6 lines from the bottom. Right, you're on mute. Alice, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. וכן משמע בתורת חטאת שם. וכן...
No, that I'm skipping. Just start for the Indian dinner.
Oh, okay. I'm going there. So is it later? Okay,
right after that.
I see. Okay. ולעניין dinner. הנה כל הפוסקים הנ"ל עומדים בשיטת רבינו ברוך.
Rabbeinu Baruch. Okay, so we're passing like Rabbeinu Baruch.
Glasses, whatever amount of full is most convenient for you, kind of guy.
Yeah, I feel like I'm hungry.
וכן פרש מערב בתשבט סימן so and so.
Ken Pasak Mahara, right. Go ahead.
ומביאו was it the Chulin? Was the Rashi involved?
Kemivio bahagaot Mordechai de Chulin.
Okay, the Chulin. וכן פרש ואיסור ההתר, וכן הסכימה שר שם, וכן פרש הבח ושאר האחרונים, אלא שהרב בתורת חטאת שם מקל בדבר.
Oh, so wait a second. Everybody paskins like Rabbeinu Baruch, except for the Ramah in his Torah's Chatas. Go ahead.
והבח הסיק עליו וכתב דלא כתורת חטאת, בלא טעם.
Below Tam Baraya. He said, we're not, the Bach, he said the Ramah is wrong, but I'm not telling you why.
ובאמת, יש לעיין בדבר, דהה טענת הרב בתורת חטאת, לכאורה נכונה היא, דלא גרה מנפשך דאזלינן לקורה. משום דכיוון דהווי דרבנן.
דלא גרה מנשפach. So, we didn't read the Torah Chatat, but the case of Nishpach is where you know where it's a case of min b'mino, where the Rabbanan you need 60 liquid min b'mino, and you knew you had rov, but then it spilled, and you don't know if you had 60 or not. So there we say that since you me'ikra din you only need rov, and you maybe had 60, maybe you didn't, but it was spilt, and you can never find out if you had 60. So it's really only the Rabbanan that you need 60. So Safek the Rabbanan lahakia. So he says this is similar. It's lo gara min nishpach. It's no worse than that. That's also a kind of a case of doubt. And here is a kind of case of doubt. And I guess it's also Asur Rabbanan, even though the fish is Asur Deraita, but maybe this is somehow Asur Rabbanan. I don't know. Let's say anyway. He says it's lo gara min nishpach.
משום דכיוון דהווי דרבנן, ויש ספק אם יש שם 60, אז לינן לכולה.
Mishum, so he says why? Mishum dekaven dahave de Rabbanan. Why is it de Rabbanan? Why is it de Rabbanan?
Because it's like the oraita would be rough, like if it's min b'mino, right?
Oh, because it's min b'mino. You're saying it's min b'mino, even though the shark isn't min b'mino, and the flavor of the shark is in those pieces, but still the pieces are min b'mino. I think it's a bit weird to call that min b'mino.
And we know how Rama thinks about min b'mino, and right.
You go after name. Oh, actually, the Rama holds you go after name. And not only that, when he lists, when the Beit Yosef lists the things that are after name, I think it's the Beit Yosef, he lists little fish. He says fish are all the same.
Okay.
So yeah, it's min b'mino. Maybe the shark is a bad example. Maybe it's not a shark. Maybe it's a sturgeon that's the same min. It's just a treif min, but it's the same flavor. So then it's min b'mino. It's only Rabbanan.
ואם כן הוא הדין החד. וגם טענה השנייה נכונה היא, כיוון דקיימלן כהרשב"א והטור ספק ספיקה.
No, סוף סימן.
סוף סימן, I thought it was zero. Okay, סוף סימן, right? והכל נכנס בספק.
So this is a case, this is what I think Lexi referred to this. This is in Siman 111, and it talks about like if you have a treif, thing fell into 3 different pots, one of 3 different pots. You don't know which one. So you can combine all of them and say, well, I have 60 against it because I have, all the pots together 60. Say, well, wait a second, but they're not together now. So they say, well, they're so full. In the end, we're going to put them all together. So we're going to say it's batel now. Because the suffix is chal on all the pots together. If I look at it as a group, and in fact, the Gemara even says, even if one is in the attic and one is in the basement, we view it, and I don't know where it is, so I view the whole group as the things that are contributing to the bittul, because the whole group has the safek about it. So he says that's also correct. Everything goes into that safek.
ולמה לא יצטרף כאן הכל לבטל?
Right. Why shouldn't everything here join to mevatel it? So what does he say? Where are we? Where are we in this discussion? we are now saying that maybe the Ramah is right. We should paskin like Rabbeinu Shimshon, and just say it's always mutter.
ודוחה כלומר, דווקא גבי שתי גדרות של ההתר שנפל איסור לתוך אחת מהן, ואין ידוע לאיזה נפל, ואין בכל אחת מהן לבטלו. הוא דקיימלן דשתיהן מצטרפות. כיוון דהשתא יש ספק לפנינו, ולא נודע לאיזה נפל. אם כן, אכל חדה וחדה, אם כן, אכל חדה וחדה, איקה למימר דהי דהתרה היא.
Right. Each pot, you can say he's the heter one.
ונהי דחדה מנהי הוא, ודאי איסורה היא. מכל מקום, כיוון דלא נודע איזה הוא, שניהם מצטרפים.
Since you don't know which one is the Isser, they both join together and they join. And he's just really explaining that din over there in Siman 111.
Right, Mashen ken hacha, but this is a different case. Dele'olam lo noda ezehu, ונתערבו יחד קודם שנולד הספק.
In other words, they mixed together before I even noticed that there was that baby shark in there. Now he says that you shouldn't say. Don't say that they're different. The adarabba, the opposite is true.
איפכא מסתבר, דהה גבי שתי גדרות שדינן להו, מטעם שכל שעתיד להתערב, רואים אותו כאילו הוא כבר מעורב.
Anything that will one day join, we view it as if it's already joined. כל
שכן אם הוא מעורב כבר.
So certainly in our case where it's already mixed, we should be able to join all the things. Now I poured it in several pourings, but now it's all in the serving tray. It's all mixed, so it should all join. So he says it should be like Rabbeinu Baruch.
Okay.
Go ahead.
ודוחה כלומר, דכל הנח פוסקין לא סבירה להו כהרשב"א והטור. ועוד, ועוד דאם כן לא הבלן לפסוק כמתיהו, כיוון דכל הנח פוסקין חולקין עליהו, ובפרט שהם מחמירים.
So wait a second. This part is a little bit. What is he saying here? What is he saying here?
So what's the svara of Rashba and the Tur here?
I'm not sure exactly what he's saying, but I think he's saying that that all those poskim, you can't say that all those poskim don't go like. Wait, what's the Rashba's opinion? What Rashba and what Tur? What Rashba?
It's the Rashba and the Torah saying that they eat Tzarech Levatel, right? That he's saying this thing that comes up in Kofyan Aleph.
In other words, right. In other words, that would be a potential answer.
Like Kol Shekain, if you hold that, Kol Shekain, you should hold that it's fine here, is his initial assumption. So he's saying,
and it's dochak to say, right? Very good. It's dochak to say
that like all those people just don't hold by that svara either, which is why they don't hold by it.
Okay. V'od de'im kein lo havelan lifsok kaftaihu kevan dekol hanak poskim holchim alayhu. Ubefrat shehem machmirim. What are they machmirim about? In other words, we wouldn't paskin like. But we are paskining. If everybody is cholek on the Rashba, then why is this Shulchan Aruch paskining like that, like the Rashba? We should be more machmir, like all those poskim that are cholek. So it must be that they also agree with the Rashba. So it sounds like that the Ramah has a good argument to hold like Rabbeinu Shimshon. Okay, v'od.
ועוד דהרי דהטור עומד גם כן בשיטת רבינו ברוך. וסתם בסימן ק"א כהרשב"א.
So the Tur holds like Rabbeinu Baruch, not like Rabbeinu Shimshon, yet he holds like the Rashba. So we're left in a bit of a mystery here. how could we reject the Ramah and yet paskin this Rashba in Yud Aleph, in Kuf Yud Aleph? So now we keep going. ונראה.
ונראה, דכל הן פוסקים מיילי במין ושאינו מינו, שהדג טמא אינו מינו.
Oh, so it must be that, I think when he says Mairi, I think what they mean to say is those poskim consider this to be min be'eno mino. And once it's eno mino, then we have to be machmir. Then we can't say the proofs that he said that the pots joined together. We can't say the proof. That was only because that nishpach is not like nishpach. Nishpach was min b'mino. But if it's eno mino, it's also you need 60 midoraita. So all those proofs go away if we believe that this is a case of min be'eno mino.
וכן הביצת אפרוח או ביצה של תפדם הוא אינו מינו עם שאר הביצים, והילקח במין בשאינו מינו, כיוון דאיקה למיקם הטעמה מתחילה לא נכנס הכל בספק. דהה היה אפשר לבוא לידי ברור.
So because it's eno mino, you could taste it, and therefore we don't really have the case that we don't know which pot it's in. If it's in 3 different pots, but it's only in one of them, just have a goy. Have a goy taste it, and even if you don't have a goy, it's still called efshar levarer. It's positive. The fact that you don't have a goy is your problem, but halakhically, I could check out which pot it's in, and then they don't all join in the safek. They only all join in the safek if it's all min b'mino, and there's no way of a human being discerning which pot it's in. So he's basically saying that we consider this case to be min b'she'eno mino, and that's why we don't paskin like Rabbeinu Shimshon. And we don't be this toled. Now, the Rabbeinu Shimshon had this nice idea, we'll just assume everything was good. So his answer is like, you can only assume everything is good when it's really only an Issa D'Rabbanan. When it's min b'mino, and really min D'Rabbanan rov is enough. But when it's min b'she'eno mino, then you can't make those assumptions. And we're categorizing this as min b'she'eno mino, and therefore we have to paskin like Rabbeinu Baruch. Aaron, your question or comment?
Oh, just right that another way I think of framing what the Shach is saying here is that he is claiming that Rabbeinu Shimshon is saying there is no point during the process had I thought to, I've poured half of either I poured all my rotev out or I poured half my rotev egg mixture out. Let me just double check to make sure that neither of these two pots have the taste. Theoretically, let me intervene and make sure neither of these 2 pots have the taste of some sort of isser. According to Rabbeinu Shimshon, according to the Shach, there is no point in the process in which it could have told. The only time I could have known that I have a birya here is when at the end of the process, I notice it. And the Shach is saying, theoretically, in the middle of this process, had you paused and said, oh my God, I didn't cook these with the chashash in mind that maybe there was a birya, I theoretically, though, could have intervened in the middle and tasted that there was a birya, or that there was a min b'she'eno mino. Because I theoretically could have intervened, then it's not a case of shafet.
Then it's not a case of, right. That's a nice way to put it, yeah. In other words, I had the possibility of livarer, and I didn't do it. So I don't get the luxury of saying it all joins in suffix. Okay, so let's summarize and say that we're passing like Rabbeinu Baruch. And therefore what? And therefore, you do need a large number. But if you have eggs, you will have a problem. You will have a problem. In fact, if you have an actual efroach or real dam, in other words, nowadays we don't have real dam because our eggs are separated, the males and the females. But if you had real blood, then you would have a problem. And therefore you should follow the Beit Yosef's advice of letting it cool down before you take it out. If you had 60, if you have less than 60, there's no point. If you're cooking 12 eggs, then it's irrelevant. Either it'll all be treif or it'll all be kosher. It was nothing you can. Cooling down won't help you.
So of course, the Taz does point out that he at least thinks that the Mechaber's opinion on this vis-a-vis the eggs is l'chachila, that he thinks the Mechaber believes b'diavad, even with the eggs, it'd be permitted.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying. There's yes, exactly. There's a right. B'diavad mutter k'sheyesh k'yesh material, and that's right. Fine. Okay. And only why is that? That's because actually the Ramah holds. Well, you're saying even the Beit Yosef says like that. Where are you getting this Taz? The first Taz says Torah Chata. Daktek with the lo katava shulchan aruch im lo asakein asur. Hence he never said it's asur. Shma mina the dafke lechatchila kama. Right. That's the way the Torah Chata learns. That's what I was saying. I said that earlier. That I don't know if it's the Taz is saying that.
Right. I mean,
He's
the
saying
Taz
that the
quoting
Ramah
is saying, but presumably the Taz is also bringing that without being cholek on it because he agrees.
Right. Okay. Presumably agrees. But the point is that the Ramah holds that he's not arguing on that Rabbeinu. Sorry, that the Beit Yosef is basically agreeing with Rabbi Shimshon, Rabbeinu Shimshon. That's the way you would matter the eggs.
If I can ask, what's the she'enomino part in the tipat dam in egg? Like, is it the whole egg which is not mino, or is it just the dam which is?
Yeah, I was glossing over this point. Yes, it would only be the dam. You'd only need 60 against the dam.
Only the dam. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Yes. There's. I saw that somewhere. I don't remember exactly where, but. So wait a second. Let's go back. In the Shulchan Aruch, it says, in the Ramah, it says, Yesh matirin b'kol inyan, right? Delo machzikinan isura. That's Rabbeinu Shimshon. If you look at the Gra on Dalet, I'm not going to read the whole Gra, but towards the end there, he says, there's a period. He says, Ayin Shach, and then he says a period, and then he says, Mikom Makom Iker Dina. Sarich Iyun. He says, really, is this really true that you need that yesh matirin? Ha dekaimalan delo amrinan beruba ita. Vashagatu b'siman kuf aleph sif katan zayin. If you look in sif in kuf aleph sif zayin, you'll see we don't hold like this opinion of that it's in beruba. Let's look there. Let's look there very quickly. Kuf Aleph Zayin. Review. If the Gra tells us to look there, and I think we should look there, then we should look there. If Zayin in Kuf Aleph. He says, so this is talking about, I believe this is talking about Haticha Ruya Litchabet. Oh, I'm in the Beit Yosef, that's why I turned too many pages. Kuf Aleph. Right. And, sorry. So he says, it says in Zion here, in the Shulchan Aruch, Kuf Aleph Zion, Im nechtecha chaticha achat, ein tolin lomar shel iser nechtach. If you have, let's say, a mixture of large pieces of meat, and one of them is nevela, and you can't tell which one is nevela, and one of them got cut, what's the din? We learned the din. What's the din? Anyone remember? Or we can see it right here. But the din is you can eat the one that you cut. Mimanavshach. You can eat the one that you cut, mimanavshach, because if it's the Isser one, then now it's not Rui Letchavetas Batel. And if it's not the Isser one, then for sure you can eat it. But you can't eat the rest. Why? It says that, so the Gra says, we don't, if you read just the first line, Im nechtecha chaticha achat, ein tolin lomar shel Isser nechtach. This is an Isser de Rabbanan, right? I mean, you're right, that's Batel. Chaticha Rui Letchavetas Isser de Rabbanan. This is Isser Rabbanan. Why aren't we told to say the one that got cut is the Isser one, and then the whole mixture would be with her? We don't say that. We don't say that for sure the one that got cut is the Isser one, and that would permit the whole mixture. We only allow you to eat the one that got cut, but not the whole mixture. So the Gra says, this seems like a contradiction. And he says, Tarek Iyun. So the Gra couldn't figure it out. I can't figure it out either. But just letting you know that there is contradiction here. Okay, let's go to Sifbet in our remaining time. Oh, wait a second. Before we go there, there's a shach that I want to just look at quickly. Shach Bet. He says, "Ein le'asor kelim, ayin b'tshuvot maharil siman kufnun aleph, shekatav harbe tamim lechalek bein ma'achal lekli." Because what's the question? Why don't we why do we stand the pot on its hezkato that it's still mutter? Let's say the same thing by the meat. Say the meat is stand the meat by its hezka. It was mutter before, let it stay mutter. Why are we applying this law of keep the pot in its state more by the pot than by any other piece of fish there? And you keep the fishes in their hezkato. They were, so he brings harbe tamim lechalek bein ma'achal lekli. V'katav sham denira delo hitir kli ela achar me'et le'et. It only should permit the pot not right away, but only after waiting 24 hours when it's only the Rabbanan. Mishum dahave seked Rabbanan denoted tam nifgam. Right. Ma denoted tam nifgam. Mizeraya dasmagva poskim mayri b'isur d'oraita. So we must be holding this as isur d'oraita. Otherwise, if it would be the Rabbanan, then we wouldn't need to wait because it would already be the Rabbanan. Okay, but on this, the Siftei Dat, look in the Prima Gadim. Look at the Prima Gadim there. The Prima Gadim says, and this is an important klal in halacha. He says, Mihu. He says, Ayin Shach. I'm in Siftei Dat Bet, which is on the Shach. Ayin Shach Mihu Safek Treif Ein Lahatir Achar Me'et Le'et Mitam Safek Rabbanan Lekula. He says like this. He says, Safek Treifa Shebishel B'Kli Ein Lahatir Achar Me'et Le'et Mitam Safek Rabbanan Lekula. We don't allow the pot after 24 hours because even though it's Rabbanan, why not? Since it was originally an Isser Torah, al yedei gilgul naaseh Rabbanan. It only became, this is an Isser D'oraita that is migalgel Rabbanan. This is a concept in halacha, which is that it's not a regular Rabbanan, it's a Rabbanan that started off as D'oraita and then only became the Rabbanan because of 24 hours passing, and we treat it as Isser D'oraita. So then if you skip 2 lines, Ela dekan yesh kamet stadim belav hakilatir. So why do we permit this one if it's also an Isser D'oraita as Megalgel D'Rabbanan? He says, because we have other reasons. What are the other reasons? I can name one. Rabbeinu Shimshon. In other words, we have Rabbeinu Shimshon. This is an example of like Tziruf. Normally, we would say that Isser D'oraita, this Megalgel D'Rabbanan, is treated like D'oraita. But here, since we have Rabbeinu Shimshon anyway, we can matter the pot after 24 hours. Okay. That's just an interesting little thing. Now, I just ate up my time, but let's just look at Bet. Zvuv v'kiyotze bo medevarim ha'muasim shenafsho shel adam katza behen. This fly that people don't want to eat, shenimsa b'tavshil v'zorko. You took it out of the tavshil. V'tavshil mutter. Why? Because even though the fly itself is aser, pleitat dvarim elu hapegumim oseret. Wait a second, I read that wrong. Zavu v'kiyotze bo medavarim hamuasim shenafsho shel adam katze behen shenimsa betavshil v'zarko v'hatavshil mutar she'ein pleta dvarim elu pogim she'ein dvarim elu hapegumim oseret. That these things that are pagum, they're what exudes from them, even though they themselves are aser, what exudes from them does not forbid. So therefore, if you took the fly out, it's fine. V'hagav v'ken haminhag pashut af al gav yesh machmirim divrei hamekelim ikar. So there are those that say you have to be machmir by this fly. In fact, I think the Darkei Moshe brings that's actually the minhag. Anyway, here he says there are yesh machmirim. In other words, people are machmir Beit Yosef. It's the Beit Yosef that brings it. So there are those that are machmir. Ve'en l'shanot minhag. Ve'im lakach im hakaf dag tameh. But what if you took a forbidden fish? He's not ma'us. People might want to eat a shrimp. Mena kedera o shar davar she'eno pogem. Asur lachzir hakaf l'kedera. You can't put the kaf back in because the kaf is now asur. Kaf absorbed flavor from that shrimp. Ve'im echzirot tzarich shishim mena kedera neged ha'isur. You need shishim against. In other words, the second time you put it in, you must still have 60 in the pot. Like presumably you had 60 when you took out the shrimp, because otherwise the whole pot would be asur. But now when you if let's say you put the spoon back in, there better still be 60 against the spoon or against the isser that was absorbed in the spoon. V'lo neged kol hakaf. But you don't need to go against the whole kaf, just the isser that was absorbed in the spoon, which would be maximum the size of the shrimp. Avalim haya me'at me'atavshil im ha'isser b'kaf. But what if there was some broth in the spoon when you took out the shrimp? V'chozer l'kedera, and you put it back in. Tzarich shishim gam neged me'at atavshil. You need 60 against the shrimp and the broth, because the broth became chanan. The broth became asur, and now it created a larger volume. And that went into the spoon, and now the spoon contains in it a larger volume. That's, of course, chanan. And if you look at Shach Hey, he says, what does he say? Lo neged kol hakaf. And this is an important concept which we've seen before. The lo amrinan bekli chanan. In other words, if you just took the shrimp out, you don't have to worry that the whole metal of the pot of the spoon became asur. You have chanan in the broth, but not chanan if you had like a tweezer and you pulled out the shrimp. The tweezer itself only absorbed the maximum value of the shrimp, but the walls of the tweezer didn't if they're larger than that, they didn't themselves become chanan. Hainu dafka b'kli shel eitz umatechet chadash. Why chadash? If it's old, then what has it in it? It has balua in it, and the balua can become chanan. When we say ein chanan bekeli, what we mean is in a new vessel. In a vessel that has no balua in it, the metal itself doesn't become chanan. But if it has balua in it, then the balua can become chanan. So if it's eitz, it has to be eitz or mateket chadash. Aval b'yashan. But if it's yashan, then we do say chanan. O shel cheres. Even if it's new, but it's clay, we also say chanan. Afilu chadash. Afilu, sorry. Oshel cheres afilu chadash datarav le'el siman tzadichet sif hey de yesh lachmir de nase nevela v'tzri shishim neged kol akav. So that's an important chazara on what we saw, which is that Hanan in Kalim, the famous question, Hanan in Kalim, and the answer here that the Shach summarizes for us is that there is Hanan in Kalim in the extent that there's Balua in the Kalim. But if it's a new Kli, then there's no Hanan in the Kli, and you only have to Mavatel what it absorbed now. Okay, so I think we did everything I wanted to do. The strange Siman, the truth is, in a sense, the Siman doesn't have anything really new. It's really just an application of things that we've seen before. We talked about like Irui, and a complicated Chach. Okay, Yisher Koyach to everybody.
Shkayach.
Laila Tov.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Next week is Joel.